wall panel just here, obviously as high up as possible, in order to get it to clear the top of the bonnet, but just check that does clear the top of the bonnet, and it really does need to be as high up as you can get it to get all the air out of the system. We've got an operator now who has fitted the carpet to the car, and he's making quite a good job. This is quite easy to fit, this stiff back carpet, easy to fit, easy to cut. And I can see he's scored the carpet, so he's got flaps like that. I'm assuming this is going on the passenger and the driver's side, that's going through the steering column, and these bits are flapping back. But yeah, that's looking quite good. So all these bits will be glued in or fastened in on small self-tapping screws.
Hello, thank you for buying a Robin Hood 2B. This video is intended to show you how to go on, how to build it simply and quickly with a minimum of bother. We know that most of you will have sufficient tools to build this, and most tools that you've already got in your shed or in your garage will be okay. You will need, towards the middle of the build, an engine lift to lift the engine into the Robin Hood. Ideally you would have an engine lift to lift it out, but you can do without that by simply lifting the body off the subframe as it sits, leaving the engine and subframe on the ground. Questions about the donor vehicle. People are uncertain which model to buy. Basically, the Robin Hood 2B is intended to take any Pinto engine Ford Sierra. That is the 1600, the 1800 2 litre. There is also the 1800 CVH engine that isn't suitable. Also the V6 engine isn't suitable either. There is also the twin cam engine. All the last three can be used, but it would mean that you, the builder, would have to do certain modifications yourself. We haven't done any development work with the 2B with these. So it would be down to you to modify the exhaust manifold, the engine mountings, etc. It appears that the 5-speed 2 litre is the most popular. There are a lot of injection engines. Again, these cause a little bit of a problem as the injection apparatus does stick through the top of the bonnet. It would mean you would have to cut the hole in the bonnet. Also, they are quite complicated electrically. So for simplicity, try just to use an ordinary carburetor engine.
Yep.
Apart from the front suspension components, this video doesn't cover stripping the donor vehicle at all. Now we do recommend that you buy a Haynes workshop manual for this, as these are excellent and good value for money. And if you carefully follow the instructions in the manual, you'll be able to strip your donor vehicle down. Safety is of the utmost importance. Be really careful, particularly if you're inexperienced. make sure you use axle stands and you don't put the vehicle on bricks or milk crates or anything like that. And you do watch out for electrical fires and petrol fires, etc., particularly if you're grinding. Try to make sure you've got somebody with you all the while you're doing this difficult work. Work that involves any sharp corners, make sure you wear some safety gloves as well. We've tried to make this video as clear as possible and easy for you to follow. However, we do know that builders of Robin Hood cars are of varied skills, and there is a very, very experienced and very inexperienced. It may be that somebody may need extra help, and we're quite happy to help you, but I would say it's important that you do watch the video first 2 or 3 times. Now, there isn't any index at all with the video. People will say, why don't you put an index with a video so we can find the areas we want to watch? We deliberately don't do this to stop you doing this. You've got to watch the whole video at least 3 times before you start and make your own index from watching the video. You really must watch it right the way through, because obviously towards the end of the video we may add little things in that we've forgotten earlier on. So watch the video right the way through. If you come across a problem, then we're quite happy to help you. And you can get through to me personally between 9 o'clock and 5 o'clock nearly all the time, Monday to Friday. You'll get me direct on 0976 640 841. I may not sound really, really happy to hear from you, so try to get directly to the point. I'm probably in between doing something quite complicated, or we've got a problem or something like that. So I'm not really interested in the weather. Just get straight to the point, tell me your problem, and I'll do my very best to help you. As some of you already know, we're not open all the time. We're only open for sales while we've got stock of kits. If we're in between models and we don't bother to open, no point trying to sell things that you haven't got. But we are open for spares all the time. So if you ever want spares, whether it's an accessory or a replacement part, something you perhaps spoiled in the manufacture of your kit, or you've had an accident, then if you ring the number that I've just given you, or the office number, then they will organise the possibility of you coming here and collecting the spares at nearly any time to suit you. You can also take spares to kit car shows to make it simpler. One of the areas we get lots of questions about is initially registering the finished Robin Hood, and then obviously there's the SVA test. Now this video does cover the SVA test quite well later on. It goes through the car that we've successfully had a pass with. However, the problem with the SVA in general is they do keep moving the goalposts and making it up as they go along. So we'll help you as much as we can, but it may be that you will have to contact the SVA people direct if you get any real difficulties. Also, we get lots of questions about registering the Robin Hood at the end when it's completed. We'll tell you how to do that, but again, the licensing authority does issue booklets and guidelines, and we have found out quite simply that up and down the country, each licensing authority has different rules. We have even found there's certain authorities that maintain that for a Robin Hood you don't need an SVA test. So that makes it quite difficult for us, because obviously this last legal part of it is split between 2 departments, the licensing department and the Ministry of Transport, both of which are different. So we're here to help you, but often it may be better for you to contact the authorities direct. We will give you the design weights towards the end of the video of your Robin Hood and help to fill the form in. When you collected your kit, you'll notice that you've got a bag full of nuts and bolts. Obviously it wasn't possible if you check those off, but you'll probably agree with me there is a lot in the bag. What we really want you to do when you get home is to tip these nuts and bolts out onto your dining room table and sort them out. You will get, or you will have got, a nut and bolt check-off list. with the number of nuts and bolts, the type of nuts and bolts it is, or not just nuts and bolts, fasteners, pop rivets, U-bolts, little bits of tube, all kinds of things. It will give you a list of the components of the fasteners, and it will tell you where they go and what size they are. So at this early stage, a nice job for you when you, instead of watching television, is tip them out onto the dining room table and put them all in piles, and by the number that you've got in the fastener pack and the description of them, you will be able to identify them all. These need to be put into small containers, something like margarine tubs that you can mark, so when you build your Robin Hood 2B, you'll be able to know the correct nuts and bolts for the particular application. In addition, although there is a lot, you will need more, so we do need to supplement these from nuts and bolts that you use stripping your donor vehicle down. So I know all of you've saved all these, you haven't thrown them away, you've got them all saved. You will need some of those in the build of your 2B. We do maintain that you can build your 2B without any welding, and I do believe this is possible. However, I know a lot of you will want to weld it. You've had a nice new machine mark MIG welding set for Christmas and you want to use it. Please, whatever you do, don't weld anything until you're certain it's in the right place. I would like to see you follow our instructions and fasten it all together with nuts and bolts and screws, and when you've finally decided that you're happy and everything fits correctly, then you can weld it. Don't over weld it, you only need to tack weld it. Too much heat and you'll distort the panels. So remember, don't weld anything until you're certain it's in the right place. Further on in the video, there are certain areas, for example, the windscreen assembly and the windscreen fitting, that we've taken from earlier videos of earlier Robin Hood cars. So the actual process is the same. That's the windscreen, the GRP rectification, etc. You will notice that it's a different Robin Hood, but the actual process is identical to your 2B. So please don't get confused if you see something a bit different to your car. Start in earnest on the chassis and fitting the rear axle, etc. The chassis that we see here in front of us is the chassis just in the form that you would get it from us, with the floor already temporarily fitted in. Now, we are recommending that you do wash the chassis down well with cellulose thinners and then paint it with a bare metal primer. That's a good idea for the floor as well. However, you can go on and you can carry out the process that we're doing now and paint the body panels and the chassis all in one go, but it's entirely up to you. The first thing is for me to establish with you which engine and gearbox you're fitting. It's important that you use a later type set of engine mountings, even if you've got an early engine. I'll show you those in a few minutes. I'll show you both types so you can identify. The chassis that you've got from us is to accept the later type engine mountings. That's the engine mountings with a pin out the top and a pin out the bottom. The axle is pretty straightforward. The axle that we've got prepared has only been wire brushed down and a coat of black primer applied to it. We're going to remove this section from the floor. This has been left in so that we could get more components in the kit while it's being transported. So with a pair of metal cutting shears, we're going to snip out this section. The only part of the welding that is exposed on the finished 2B is the little bit where the backstay reaches the roll bar, and we're just going to cosmetically tidy that up with a mini grinder. At the same time, where these two tubes join, we're going to tidy that up. There's been many improvements and changes made to the chassis since the video has been initially made. The tube at the back is now made in 3 pieces and not 2, so there isn't a join in the centre. The joins are at both sides. In addition, you'll note that we've changed the tubes that go down towards the gearbox pickup points. As you can see, they're vertical in this picture. Now they're splayed out in the way of a Y. This is so that you can now put the instruments in the center of the dashboard instead of being in the middle. This means that you can move your steering wheel higher so that fat people can drive the car easier. You'll notice also we've changed the design of the actual gearbox mounting plates. Everything is an improvement, and it is for the better.
Make sure when you're grinding, the main thing is that you're wearing safety goggles all the time. The earmuffs aren't quite so important, but make sure you wear the safety goggles. Also, when you're grinding, watch out for the sparks. The sparks can damage any glass that's nearby, either automobile glass or your conservative glass, and the sparks can set fire to things like jars of thinners or paint that's lurking around. So be very careful of fire as well.
I don't know what I'm looking at.
We've got the chassis in a position now to accept the rear subframe, and we've got it actually sitting on a milk crate on a piece of wood. Now we do use milk crates now and again, but remember that the use is limited only to the very early parts of the build where there isn't any weight involved. As soon as there's any weight, you must abandon the milk crates and use proper axle stands. One milk crate under the centre of the car with a bearer going across it in line with the centre cross member, and this nicely balances the chassis like so, and we've just got a box of tools at the front, you can see, to keep the weight down, to keep the front down, to get it weighted down. So we've got that balanced nicely. We now come to the subframe. As I said previously, all we've done is just to wire brush it up and give it a coat of black primer. The bolts that go through the outside of the rear trailing arm need to be taken out and put in the opposite way round, so the nuts are to the inside, and then you'll tap out the bolt so that the end of the bolt is flush with the inside, so there's nothing sticking out at all. Like so. At this point, remember, if you've any damage to the gaiters or you feel inside and there's ball bearings loose or the split, it's a good time to change the gaiters or to put an exchange rack on, exchange shaft on. You also really need to be taking off the old handbrake cable. We haven't taken it off, we've just cut it off. And these brake pipes, you could really do with replacing those and anything that needs doing inside the brakes. But for simplicity, we've just cut those off so we can get on with the video. You'll see that there are large rubber mountings that are used in the Ford Sierra, and they've got some tube that come through them like that locate. Now, these are very expensive to buy new and they're difficult to fit, and they're not used on the 2B, only for location purposes, so you don't need to replace those. We've noted when we took it off that the actual metal tube in the driver's side had come adrift. You can see you can knock it through like that. Don't worry, just knock it through from the bottom so it sticks up like that. What we're going to do in actual fact is to trim those tubes off. So there's round about ½ an inch sticking up through the rubber. So we're going to cut those off with a hacksaw or with an angle grinder. So we'll do that in a few minutes. Also remember, when you're cleaning this axle, when you're working on it, oil always runs out of it. So it's a good idea to drain the oil out before you start and to make a note, a physical note on the garage wall that there's no oil in the axle, and to top it up with fresh oil. So
remember to change the oil. You could check all the rubber bushers at the same time. Remember, there are 10mm fine metric thread. You won't get those in your toolbox. And completely the rubber mounting, so there's no rubber mounting, it isn't used any longer. So we're not far off now, ready to fit it into the car, but first of all I'm going to get the angle grinder and cut off those tubes. You may also, when you're grinding things, you may need just to relieve the pressing around that outer wishbone housing. There's a little web on it, you may just have to grind the web off. Probably with a provisional line up onto the chassis, you'll be able to establish this. Remember, when we build these chassis, we do use engines, gearboxes and axles as part of the jig. So there is an axle just like this in our jig, so we're pretty confident that it will fit. At the same time, you've got the grinder. There is a bracket here you need to grind off for the exhaust that's no longer used. Cut.
Okay.
Later on in this video, we'll be drilling 2 holes in this subframe to firmly locate it into the chassis. There's 2 holes in the underside of the rear strengthening plates, which you will project through and drill into the subframe. These holes, when you project them through, will be somewhere there.
Stop.
Now we have to find these holes in the metal floor. Now what happens is that if your cameraman, you just come up to the drilling through these holes from the top. So all I'm going to do is get my hammer now and tap that. That indicates, I can see I put a little indentation in it. That shows us where we're going to drill through from the top. See that that's where the handbrake will fit, and there will be a strengthening angle that will go right the way across the car to give you extra strength. We're now going to move this subframe forward directly underneath the holes in the 2 strengthening plates. We've got it on a trolley jack now, and I've got a couple of colleagues that's helping me. There's lots of ways you can do this. You can drag it across the floor physically, you and your mates. You can put it on your son's skateboard. You made a little trolley, there's lots of things. You can even put the wheels on and wheel it underneath. So we're going to move it forward now. Remember, all the time with these operations, that you're thinking about safety, you're watching your fingers, you're watching your chum's fingers. We're spying through these holes now, and we can see we're more or less level. Ease it across there, 1/4 inch. Okay? So what happens now is that we need to put some blocks of wood. We've conveniently found that these floor joists, these 9-inch floor joists, will go on edge, and they fit underneath the point that we've just worked on, under those bigger rubber mountings. Unfortunately, it
it makes the subframe so it's level and we can press down on it.
Stop.
We're now removing the counterbalance, the box of Allen keys, and that then brings the back of the body down naturally. We adjust...
Hang on.
I forgot what I was saying now.
We've removed the weight.
Okay, we've
removed the counterbalance.
We've now got the edge of the floor directly touching, or almost touching, that part of the subframe, because we'll line it up so both sides are nearly there. Right, Jack, what we're going to do now is we're going to press the floor down in the middle, and then we're going to lift the chassis upwards, and we're going to push the floor under those bits, and we're putting it in from above. I think that's easy.
Yeah.
Okay? And then we're nicely spying, pass me my screwdriver, we're nicely spying down those holes, and those cut-off tubes are coming through the hole like that. Okay? So all I'm doing now is getting my bolt, and I'm tapping it through like so. Nearly there. Just needs a little bit of persuasion. Up, like that. Do you want a hammer, Jack? Okay, that's good. Now, what is important, and that's gone through there, at this stage now, we've got to get the diff mounting past the angle. Now, it always does seem as if it's not going to go because it is very, very tight. So it just needs a little bit of persuasion to get it in. Now, just hang on. What we'll do, we'll get a nice piece of timber, John, a nice bit of 3x2, long piece, the same as we had across in the incinerator across there, right? The same as we had underneath the car. We just need to spring that in. We're having difficulty in getting that casting past that piece of angle there. So we've decided that we're going to take these bolts out at the side now, like so, and then we've got both out, and now we think it may be a little bit easier to prise it. Like that, it's gone in. So that's good. That was all it needed. So what's going to happen now is we're going to put these bolts back in the side again. We're going to just press that down like that, and we're going to mark just here around it, and project directly like that, because we're now going to drill a hole in this about ½ an inch from the top that will put the bolt back in to retain that. So we're projecting where it wants to be, and we're drilling through from the back. So if you just come down here, cameraman please.
Drill this hole through, you can just lift the chassis slightly and you'll be able to see the hole, so you can put a line down in line with it. If you drill about ½ an inch from the top, and preferably if you use an 1/8 drill for a pilot hole, you can ensure that it's in the right place before you finally drill it out. See, by moving the chassis up and down, the hole is in line, so now I'll enlarge it. And then tighten it up. Okay.
I'm going to put these bolts in the other way around, so we're taking the bolt out like that, and we're going again to put it back in. It's a good idea just to keep those lined up, and then it's just a matter of really, as we did it before,
prizing it.
Using the studding that you get in your kit, we're going to pull this together. So we pop the studding through there, like so. Put a washer on the bottom and a nut. And then 2 larger washers on top. That the tube will pull through, and then another washer on top of that, like so. And we can tighten it all up and sandwich a lot together. Off the tangent now and move on to the front McPherson strut. Now obviously this is an area that we've had lots of questions about. What happens to the front suspension, what do you use, what do you keep, what do you throw away, etc, etc. How does the suspension work? The reason that we've suddenly gone off in a different direction onto the front suspension is that we do use everything from the front suspension, and there is a large diameter washer at the top which we need to use on the assembly of the rear suspension. First of all, I'll familiarise you with it. We've got the key part, is what we need is this lower stub axle with the 4 bolts and the hub on it. You can see that that is the drop arm that the track rod end goes into. Then on the Ford Sierra, that is the tapered hole that the bottom track control arm goes into. We need initially to take off the stub axle, and you'll see that there's a bolt just there, a 12mm bolt, and it's a 19mm spanner size. Now, without any doubt at all, you'll find it very difficult to get that off. There is a chance that someone has recently fitted a new McPherson strut onto the car because the old one was leaking for the MOT, and you might find it quite easy. But pretty definite, that will be pretty seized on. So what I would say to you is, first of all, when you've got it off and you've got it on the bench and in the vice like this, the first thing to do is have a good look at it and give it a good beating. So you'll beat that bolt hard, square on like that, and then you'll tap the casing a little bit like that, and then possibly you'll turn it around upside down like that, and into that little cavity there you can pour some penetrating oil and leave it overnight. Again, the next day you can then give it a bit more of a tapping like that, and hope that the penetrating oil is penetrated down into the threads. Now, I'll be quite truthful, this was quite stiff when we came to it yesterday, and what we did, we cheated slightly. We got the blow lamp and we warmed up that part of the casing, or the forging, the casting. We warmed that up until it just glowed cherry red, and then we found that we could just move that a little bit, a 1/16 of an inch,
As soon as we got it moving a 1/16 of an inch, then we put penetration oil on it, and then it gradually we moved backward and forward like that, and it came out. Now, I must confess there's lots of them that we've snapped off. If you snap it off, then don't worry, it's not the end.